The ancient Greeks told a terrifying story. A woman with snakes for hair, eyes that could turn men to stone. A monster so horrifying that heroes crossed oceans just to kill her. Her name was Medusa, and for centuries, that name became a warning. But what if the story was never really about a monster? What if Medusa was not evil, but violated, cursed, abandoned, and silenced? What if the most horrifying thing about Medusa was not what she became, but what was done to her? Today, we dive into one of mythology's darkest tragedies, the story of a woman transformed into a monster, and how history remembered the victim as the villain, long before the snakes, before the curse, and before the decapitated head held high by heroes. Medusa was said to be breathtakingly beautiful. In many versions of Greek mythology, she was once a mortal woman living in ancient Greece. Unlike the monstrous image we know today, Medusa was admired for her beauty above all else. Her hair, especially, was legendary. Poets described it as golden, flowing like sunlight over water. People stared when she walked by. Men desired her, and women envied her. And according to later Roman retellings, Medusa became a priestess in the temple of the goddess Athena. Now, Athena was not just any goddess. She was the goddess of wisdom, warfare, discipline, and purity. Her temples demanded strict devotion. Priestesses were expected to remain loyal and untouched. Medusa served Athena faithfully. But in Greek mythology, beauty was dangerous, especially for women, because beauty attracted attention. And attention from gods almost never ended well. Among the Olympian gods, few were more feared than Poseidon, god of the sea. God of storms, earth-shaker, powerful, unpredictable, and impossible to resist. One day, Poseidon saw Medusa, and he wanted her. Some ancient versions of the myth are vague, softened by poetic language. But many later interpretations and most modern readers understand what happened next for what it truly was. Medusa was assaulted inside Athena's temple. Not outside, not in secret, inside the sacred temple itself. And that detail matters, because the temple was supposed to be a place of protection. Instead, it became the place where her life was destroyed. But what happened afterward is what makes Medusa's story truly tragic. Athena did not punish Poseidon. Instead, she punished Medusa. Imagine that for a moment. A god commits violence. A mortal woman suffers, and the woman is blamed. Athena, enraged that her temple had been desecrated, turned her fury toward Medusa. Her beautiful hair transformed into twisting serpents. Her face became so terrifying that anyone who looked directly at her turned instantly to stone. In some versions of the story, her skin hardened like scales, her eyes became monstrous, and her humanity stripped away. Then suddenly, the woman once admired for her beauty became a creature everyone feared. The world stopped seeing Medusa as a victim. Now she was a monster. People fled from her. Stories spread about her horror, and men came seeking glory by hunting her. Medusa then disappeared into exile, isolated far from human civilization. It is one of the cruelest transformations in mythology, not just physical transformation, but social transformation. Because once society labels someone a monster, few people ask what happened to them in the first place. Medusa was eventually driven to a remote place at the edge of the world, a dark, lonely land where almost no one dared to go, and all around her were statues, stone figures frozen in terror, warriors, hunters, and men seeking fame. Every one of them turned to stone after trying to kill her. Think about that image. An isolated woman, surrounded by reminders of the violence committed against her, surrounded by people who came for her head. Some modern interpretations see Medusa's gaze differently, not as evil, but defensive. A power born from trauma. The world had become dangerous to her, and now anyone who tried to harm her could never touch her again. For thousands of years, Medusa was painted as a terrifying beast. But many modern readers ask an uncomfortable question: if Medusa truly was evil, Why are most of the people approaching her armed men trying to kill her? Shouldn't it be the other way around? Then came the hero, Perseus. In Greek mythology, Perseus was one of the great legendary heroes, the son of Zeus himself. And like many heroes of myth, he was sent on an impossible mission. Bring back the head of Medusa. Alive was not an option. The king who sent him expected Perseus to die trying, because no one survived Medusa. But the gods aided Perseus. Athena gave him a polished shield. Hermes gave him a curved blade. Other magical gifts followed. Winged sandals, a bag to carry the head, even a helmet that granted invisibility. It took multiple gods to help one man kill a single isolated woman. And even then, Perseus could not face her directly, because to look at Medusa was death. So he approached her indirectly, watching her reflection in the shield. That detail is important. The hero never truly looked her in the eyes. One night, Perseus reached Medusa's lair while she slept. Not during battle, not in a fair fight, but asleep. The snakes rested quietly around her head. The cave was silent. And using the reflection in his shield, Perseus raised his blade. Then struck with one swing, Medusa was decapitated. And from her blood, according to mythology, sprang two beings, the winged horse Pegasus and Chrysaor, a giant warrior. They were children of Poseidon. Even in death, Medusa's connection to Poseidon remained. Perseus stuffed her decapitated head into a magical sack and escaped as Medusa's sisters awoke screaming. And here is where the mythology becomes even more haunting. Even in death, Medusa's head still had power. Anyone who looked at it turned to stone. It became a weapon, a trophy, something carried by heroes. The victim became an object, used by others long after her death. Eventually, Perseus gave Medusa's head to Athena. Yes, the same goddess who placed a curse on her. Athena then placed the head upon her shield, the aegis, as a symbol of power and protection. Think about the irony. The woman punished for being violated became a weapon for the gods. And over time, Medusa's face transformed into something else entirely, a symbol. In ancient Greece, images of Medusa were placed on buildings, armor, shields, and temples. People believed her face could ward off evil. The monster became protection against monsters. Even the Greeks themselves seemed uncertain about what Medusa truly represented: fear, punishment, power, or warning. Now, here is where things get complicated. Because mythology changes depending on who tells it. In some of the oldest Greek sources, Medusa was born a monster from the beginning, one of the three Gorgons. In those versions, she was not originally a beautiful priestess. That interpretation came much later, especially from the Roman poet Ovid. Ovid's version is what most people know today. The tragic woman transformed after being assaulted by Poseidon. And this is important because myths are never fixed, they evolve. Each generation reshapes them according to its fears, values, and beliefs. Ancient Greece often portrayed female power as dangerous. Women in mythology who were emotional, independent, or powerful frequently became monsters. Think about figures like the Sirens, the Furies, or Scylla. Medusa fits into that pattern perfectly. But modern audiences began rereading her story through a different lens, not as a tale about defeating evil, but as a story about victim blaming, about power, about how societies punish women for suffering violence done to them. And suddenly, Medusa stopped looking like a monster. She started looking human. Thousands of years later, Medusa remains everywhere. In movies, art, fashion, books, tattoo designs, and statues. Modern artists often portray her not with horror, but with sadness, rage, or strength. Because Medusa had become something larger than mythology, she represents victims who were blamed for their suffering, transformation through trauma, and demonization instead of protection. For some, Medusa symbolizes feminine rage. For others, survival. And for many, her story feels disturbingly familiar even today. A powerful man commits violence. Society questions the victim. The victim is shamed. Then history remembers her as dangerous. That pattern is ancient, but not ancient enough. Maybe the saddest part of Medusa's story is that almost everyone knows her face. Very few know her pain. History remembered the snakes, the stone curse, the monster, but forgot the terrified young woman standing in Athena's temple before her life was destroyed. And perhaps that is why Medusa's story still survives, because beneath all the fantasy and mythology lies something so painfully human. The fear of being turned into something unrecognizable after trauma. The fear of being blamed for what happened to you. The fear that people will only remember you for what you became, and not what was done to you. So, was Medusa truly a monster? Or was she a victim rewritten by history into one? Maybe the answer depends on who's telling the story. Because mythology has always belonged to the powerful, but every once in a while, old monsters begin to speak for themselves, and when they do, even their story sounds very different. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more.